When listing a piece of property that does not have a residence on it and it's vacant land, you need to be sure to have your seller fill out the disclosure statement specific to vacant land. You'll notice that it's very similar to the standard property disclosure where it asks for the address, the legal description. This one also asks for the PID number. Just like the other, it asks, when did you acquire the land and what type of title evidence do you have? Are you in possession of a prior vacant land disclosure? So on and so forth. But a few things that are very unique that you do need to pay attention to and that you will need to research is it asks, has this property been in any environmental site assessments already? This is something that your seller would work with a surveying company to manage all of that. It also asks if the property has been surveyed and what the name and address and phone number of the surveying company is. Then it asks, is this land platted? This is a physical action that a seller would take at the county, and they would record it with you at the county and give you a certificate of survey. And so if yes, you would check those boxes here. It also asks if there are property markers and if it is on a public or private road, which is really important. Has this property been deemed to be in a flood zone? And if so, do you have a flood insurance policy? You would fill that out in section 12. Going on to 13, is it in any type of drainage district? Has the property been drain tiled? This would be like a farm field, for example. Is there a private drainage system, or are there any hazardous waste by any chance on the property? Are there any encroachments that you're aware of on the property? Then when you go on to the general conditions section, it asks things like, are there any improvements already on the property? That would be if you're selling a farm or selling farmland. Are there any crops on it currently? Is there any abandoned or junked motor vehicles? Are there any drainage issues, and is it conducive to being flooded quite regularly? Have there been any previous structures on the property? For example, I helped a client build one time who went to dig their basement, and we found out that it was a former Boy Scout camp and that there were some former foundations that had to be dug out. So do we know anything about the soil? Do you know anything about gravel pits? Do you know anything about any erosion or settling? This is really important when we get to line 115. It talks about, are there any use restrictions? So does the seller know of any covenants or conditions that would reduce that would restrict the type of structure that's able to be built on this vacant land? And then going on further, it lists quite a few of these special conditions. Are there any Department of Natural Resource restrictions, for example? Are there any wetland determinations, or is this on the historical register, this property, for example? You'll also want to be very clear and concise in filling out, is this property currently rented? So again, if it is farmland, it's likely leased to someone who's farming the property, and there's going to have to be some sort of pre-arrangement made on how they're going to handle it if the crops have been paid for and planted and fertilized by a farmer, yet the land is sold and closed before the land can be harvested. Is this something that you are going to share the expenses or the profits on after these expenses? Is the person who's been leasing the land going to be reimbursed for all the planting and fertilizing that they did, and so on and so forth? Then if it's not farmland and it's actually wooded land, they're asking, has the timber been harvested there in the past 25 years? Are there any plans for any new road expansions or any trails that may impact the property? When it comes to utilities on a parcel of vacant land, if it has the ability to connect to city and water and sewer, that's ideal. But if not, a well and a septic system would need to be placed in. So it's asking about those various types of utilities. For example, has a percolation test already been conducted? Are there any abandoned old wells or old septic systems that are on the property that may impact the area in which a future well or septic system could be placed? Asking about environmental concerns. Do we know of any buried storage tanks? Do we know of any hazardous substances? Again, have the soil tests been performed? Do we know of any dead or diseased trees? Have there been any animal or pest infestations? Are there any burial grounds there? On 9, it talks about, did the land at one time abut or was it located in close proximity to a gas station? So if there's a junkyard, a gas station, any other type of pollution situation, you certainly need to disclose that. Is it in or near an agricultural zone, which is what they're asking in 10? And what that relates to is, does that mean then that there would be any nighttime operation of farm machinery? Are there livestock there where there be quite a bit of manure, fertilizers, herbicides, pesticides? All of that has to be disclosed. And is there any need for those things to be remediated? It asks here in number 13. Just like the standard seller's disclosure, it asks about radon. It asks if there's any preferential tax treatment when we get here to item number G. And would that preferential tax treatment, specifically a nonprofit status or a Green Acres type, would that terminate upon the sale of the property? Is the seller a foreign individual? Are they aware of any methamphetamine that's been produced on the property? And the next several pages are all identical to a standard seller's disclosure. This seller's disclosure needs to be filled out and signed by your seller to the best of their ability. Then when an offer comes in from the buyer will sign on the bottom, and that acknowledges receipt of that valuable information.